All right, so we've got our printed circuit board all soldered up and ready to go. Now we want to add some solder to the two solder pads that are on our printed circuit board. So add some solder on those two locations. Then we want to do what we call tinning the wires. In your sensor kit, you will find 3 wires. And the way I've found that works the best to tin the wires is to put some solder on your soldering iron and then go ahead and rub that solder, heat up the wire as best you can, and then rub that solder on the wire. And this is called tinning. And this leaves a little bit of solder on the wire, on the end of the wire. Makes it easier to solder in the end. Then we're going to take those tinned wires, and it only takes just a second to solder it onto the solder pad where you added a little bit of solder. And then we want to go to the very front of the microcontroller. So to the opposite side of the front of the microcontroller. Then from the other solder pad, and that'll solder real easily, we want to go to the opposite side of the microcontroller. Sometimes it helps to maybe bend this a little bit before you do your soldering, but I got it there. So you can see they crisscross just like this. Now we need one more jumper. This jumper is going to go from the USB port to one of the big connectors that holds our USB port in place, and then to any of the outside header pins. That's what's called a ground. So we're grounding both the pin on the USB port and also the USB port itself, and then out to the header pins. All right, now we're going to get out our battery pack. This holds 3 AA batteries, got a switch on it, and a positive output and a negative. So we're going to thread the positive and negative outputs through one of the holes on the printed circuit board, and that's going to go near the male header pins. On this example I've got here, you can't see the male header pins, they're not in there, but it'd be on the back of the board there, in back of the USB port and to the right. Thread it through, and then we're going to tie a knot with both of the wires, the positive and the negative wire, and we want, maybe an inch hanging out beyond that knot. Now that knot is there, so if you yank on the battery pack when you're removing it or whatever, you don't actually yank your solders off. And so you'll be yanking on the knot rather than on the solders we're going to be making here. Then we get out our soldering iron again, and we solder our positive and negative battery wires as I've done here. So when the board is upside down, your positive wire goes on the left, your negative or black wire goes on the right. So the next step is crucially important one more time, just like last week, that we inspect the device before we put batteries in it, before we put our microcontroller in the socket on the top, or before we plug in the USB port. We want to get a real good inspection, make sure no wires are shorting out, make sure there's no solder bridges anywhere, and then we should be ready to put our 3 AA batteries in and plug in our microcontroller to the socket. And I'll show you how to do that in just a minute here, and then turn on our brain board, and hopefully we'll see flashing lights.